Candidates hoping to challenge California Governor Gavin Newsom in a recall have until Friday to get their names on the ballot. More than 24 Republicans have already announced intentions to run against the Democratic governor in the September 14th election. Last month, Governor Newsom was forced to take legal action to try to correct a hiccup in his own campaign filing. Regardless of who wins the recall, the governor's seat will be up for grabs again in 2022. For more on all of this, let's bring in Eric Ting. He is the politics editor for SFGate. Hey, Eric. So for people who haven't been closely following this recall effort, briefly explain where things currently stand and what's the likelihood that Governor Newsom will be recalled in this upcoming election?
So where things stand as of today is we finally have a date. This is new from the last week or two. There's a date locked. It will be happening on September 14th. What is also new is that we have a filing deadline for candidates at the end of next week. So the field will be locked about a week from now. We're going to know exactly who is going to be at the bottom of the ballot. The way the recall works is you have a first question: should Gavin Newsom be recalled? If more than 50% say yes, a replacement will be selected from the second question with all the other candidates running. The likelihood as to whether or not he actually gets recalled, we haven't had a poll in a little while that would speak to that question. But I think that the last polls that we did have showed that he was in a pretty good spot. We're over 55% opposition to the recall, but there is an enthusiasm gap between those who want to recall Gavin Newsom are following this much more closely than those who are not. And that enthusiasm gap could end up leading to a more interesting race than I think some are expecting right now.
And Eric, how is the governor positioned to fight this recall effort? And what does the ballot deadline of this coming Friday, July 16th, mean as the recall effort goes forward?
So what the deadline is going to mean is that people who have been considering runs or thinking about runs for a while, people that have been rumored. So Larry Elder, a conservative radio host, Rick Grinnell, a former Trump administration official, and on the Democratic side, former Los Angeles Mayor Antonio Villagrosa. This whole charade of will he, won't he, will end shortly once this filing deadline approaches, and we're going to know exactly who will possibly succeed Newsom should he be recalled. As to the position Newsom is in now, California has fully reopened. They have said that they're emphasizing school reopenings in the fall. He has been spending a lot of money on stimulus checks, the vaccine lottery, cleanup plans. The governor is working with a budget surplus, and he is putting it to use as he tries to ward off this recall.
And Eric, I'm wondering, what might the campaign season look like between now and September 14th? This isn't a regular type of election. Are there going to be things like debates, for example?
That's very, very murky. There were some debates in 2003 when former Governor Gray Davis was recalled and then succeeded by Arnold Schwarzenegger. We really have no idea as to what this is going to look like going forward. Democratic strategists that you talk to are very skeptical that Newsom would get on a stage and acknowledge this to this point. The Democratic Party has painted the recall in broad strokes as right-wing extremists, trying to link them to January 6th Capitol riots. And they have really tried to avoid referencing any specific challengers directly from the governor himself. So I don't think he will make an appearance, but could the actual candidates on the bottom of the ballot debate one another? I think that's something that can be organized, and it wouldn't shock me at all if that ended up happening down the line. But again, the details are pretty murky as of now as to what an actual campaign here would look like, because as you said, a recall election is not a normal election and has a bunch of weird quirks.
Yeah. So Eric, tell us, why is Governor Newsom suing the Secretary of State, Shirley Weber, someone that he appointed?
He is suing her because he wants that Democrat label next to his name on that recall ballot. They have, like I said, linked to the Republican. Their PAC for this anti-recall committee is literally named Stop the Republican Recall. They have been leaning into trying to make this a partisan issue, knowing that Democrats, from a numbers standpoint, have the advantage here. And if the Democratic base is united and turns out, it should be able to defeat a recall as long as it becomes a traditional red versus blue kind of national politics issue. He wants that name Democrat on that recall ballot, so people who maybe aren't following it super closely, they've heard about the Republican recall that's out there, come in and then vote for their Democratic governor just out of partisanship. Then again, I feel like most people voting in the recall election already know Gavin Newsom is a Democrat, so I'm unsure as to whether it's entirely necessary for them to be doing it. But it speaks to the larger strategy they have of trying to nationalize this, make this about the National Democratic Party and the National Republican Party. Because if it's about that, there are more Democrats than Republicans in California, and if people are voting party line, then the governor will survive.
And just to clarify, am I getting it right that Newsom's team actually just messed that up by not initially during the filing asking to have that Democratic affiliation put on his ballot?
Yeah, that's entirely correct. And I think they actually had their oral argument in that case on Friday. And one of the lawyers in the case, I think, straight up told the judge, like, yep, this was on me. This was my bad here. I'm the one who made this filing error. And that's what it's over. It was an oversight on their part. And it is now in court where they're going after their own Secretary of State. So very normal, fun stuff.
Yeah, while you also happen to have like a dangerous drought, wildfires, and the coronavirus there in your state. So what else is Governor Newsom trying to handle, and how much does the recall actually interfere with the job of governance?
So we're not entirely sure as to how much of Newsom's "I will not be distracted by this recall" messaging is, again, trying to delegitimize the recall effort and saying, look, it's just a waste of money. It's hamstringing us during this this multi-pronged crisis that California is facing, as you mentioned: drought, wildfire, homelessness, coronavirus, economic recovery. We're not sure how much the recall is weighing on this because, like I said, the Newsom team really, or the governor himself, has made many public appearances of late, but isn't really speaking about the recall directly. I don't know how many California voters are focused on it. From my vantage point, I'm not entirely sure if it's distracting too much from his day-to-day agenda, but it might have lit a little fire under him as it relates to these stimulus checks. 2 rounds of stimulus checks are going out. Would that be happening if we weren't in a recall? I don't know. Some of these other big spending plans, the cleanup efforts, some of the other types of public works emphasis that Newsom is placing now, would this be happening without a recall? Would the state have gone out of its way to signal full reopening and we're totally back to normal, touting the California comeback in the middle of June had it not been for this recall? I don't know. I think it's affected the way he has governed these last few months. As to whether or not it's actually hindering him, I think the evidence is less clear on that.
All right. Eric Ting, thank you for joining.
Thank you for having me.